The LA Clippers finally broke their losing streak on Sunday night with a big-time fourth quarter comeback against the Memphis Grizzlies, but they did it with Marcus Morris Sr. on the floor. There's been a lot of conversation about whether he will be taken out of the starting lineup or whether he will remain. In this episode, gonna talk about if Ty Lue is really gonna make a change. That and more on today's Locked On Clippers.
Don Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team, every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, in my 18th season as a Clipper fan. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod. And, of course, subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for more Clipper content. Remember, Locked On Clippers is free and available on all your podcasting platforms, and you can also find it on YouTube. Make sure to click the notification bell to know every single time we post a video, and comment on today's pinned question: what would your starting lineup be for the Clippers right now? In this episode, gonna talk about the whole Marcus Morris Sr. thing. We had an article from the LA Times that said that Ty Lue was going to start trimming down the rotation. Marcus Morris was rumored to be taken out of the starting lineup, but he remained. And then Ty Lue spoke positively at the end of the last game and made a comment that kind of contradicts that article. And then I'm also going to be talking about what I think the rotation should be with Norman Powell out. There's no timetable really for his return. They say a couple of weeks. They said a couple of weeks when they first announced the news. I would say about 3 weeks. In my opinion, I think he'll be back around the last week or second to last week of the season. However, good news, there was a video of him shooting the ball corner threes today at practice, and he was making them. So he might not be that far as we think from getting back on the court, or as far as we think getting back on the court. But let's get right into it. So the Clippers have had I don't want to say a problem, but it's kind of been a lingering issue that in the starting lineup, Marcus Morris, I don't want to say he's been a liability, but it's been very clear that after about the first or second month of the season, he has not been playing good enough basketball to be starting on this team. The Clippers right now lack defense. They cannot guard anybody. They're very weak at the point of attack. And a big reason for that is Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, who you'd probably say in a starting lineup of those two, Russell Westbrook, Ivica Zubac, and Marcus Morris, are the best perimeter defenders, the best wing defenders, the best point of attack defenders in that five. Well, they're also the best offensive players in the team. So they're not going to guard the number one option, sometimes not even the top two options to start the game. And teams are not going to want to make the guy that they're guarding screen, because that means that Paul George and Kawhi will then be switched onto the ball handler. Teams do not want to make Kawhi Leonard guard their best player if they had the choice. So they're going to keep Kawhi away from the action. They want Kawhi to just sit there and guard the corner and not be involved in the defensive schemes, just be a help defender. The problem is, with a team like the Clippers, in which Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, the biggest criticism of them offensively is that they don't get to the basket enough. They're older superstars, or stars that are jump shot reliant, especially in Kawhi Leonard's case, but that mid-range is just so cash. But we know that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George can still be more aggressive getting to the basket, in particular Paul George. But with Marcus Morris, who's another guy who really doesn't get to the basket, is not athletic at this stage of his career. He's had a lot of knee problems. And right now, the biggest issue with Senior, besides the fact that he doesn't move without the ball, and when he's not hitting jump shots, he's got nothing else going for him, is defensively. He's been very slow. I think he's decent in a bench role where he can come in and get you some buckets, space the floor. But starting, he's not helping that starting lineup at all. And Russell Westbrook hasn't been very good defensively either, if I'm keeping it real. He completely gets far behind on screens and sometimes gives up on the play. I will say he does react well to loose balls and rebounds, which is more than Senior does. Russell Westbrook's honestly a better rebounder than Senior, and Senior is technically listed as the power forward when the Clippers start games. But overall, point being, the Clippers have needed to make a change. Now, there was an LA Times article, and by the way, I am not going, my journalistic integrity and knowledge, being a journalism major, I'm not going to doubt the staff writer, Andrew Greif. I still don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, if it's Greif or Greif, but if someone knows Andrew, if Andrew's watching this video, please tell me how to pronounce your name properly because I'm getting really annoyed at myself. But I'm not doubting the article and that what he heard was real, because from what I heard, it was also real. So the article states, the Clippers have been preparing with an expectation that power forward Marcus Morris Sr. is on his way out of the starting lineup, according to people not authorized to speak publicly. Little used Robert Covington, who had 15 points and multiple deflections in a season-high 31 minutes against Sacramento, could be a candidate. Now, Lue said to Covington, Ty Lue told Covington to stay ready, but given that against the Grizzlies, Robert Covington went back to getting a DNP and Marcus Morris stayed in the starting lineup, and then after the game, Senior talked about how he made big shots. Well, he only made 2 shots. It's a little concerning to me, and I heard that Marcus Morris, it's just something I heard, you can believe it or if you want, but that he kind of was acting like Reggie Jackson when the idea of him coming out of the starting lineup was suggested and started, changing up his mood. And you don't want problems in the locker room at this stage. But at the end of the day, Marcus Morris needs, if that is true, Marcus Morris needs to take one for the team. At the end of the day, we can't be giving in to role players' demands. We've already been giving in to too many of our stars' demands as far as I'm concerned. But we got to show a little bit of backbone. I thought that's what, and it's easy to say for me sitting here talking about it. Like, I'm not going to, act like this is easy. There's definitely bigger things than just subbing players out that are playing worse than other players. There's a human element to this, and that's definitely a reason why Ty Lue's not making the change. I think Ty Lue honestly knows what needs to happen and that Terrence Mann needs to start, or at the very least put Robert Covington in there. But it's really not fair to Robert Covington if we're being real. Talk about Marcus Morris' feelings. How about Robert Covington's feelings? Yeah, he hasn't been a part of this team as long as Marcus Morris, but he's a very good player that's being mistreated, and he played fantastic against Sacramento. He makes our defense better, and right now we need our defense to get better. Robert Covington may not be the best on the ball, but his help defense and his hands are absolutely an asset that we have underutilized throughout the season. So the answer to the question, do I think Ty Lue's going to make a change? I don't believe so, at least not the next game. And here's the really concerning thing, is he was asked about the rotation and trimming it down, and he said, I can't do anything until Norm gets back. Well, here's the thing. We got 16 games left. He's talking like this is a baseball season, 162 games. I'm a little bit nervous. So based on that comment, I continue with what I've been saying, or I'm going to stay with what I've been saying, that right now this team all season long has lacked a sense of urgency. They do. Ty Lue, the medical staff, the players themselves, the way they play. There's no sense of must win or we're running out of time. I haven't heard those words. They think they can show up in the playoffs and be good if they're healthy. So we're just going to have to let them either pull off a miracle or just crash and burn doing that. But I do not think that Ty Lue's going to make a change with Marcus Morris in the starting lineup. There's no reason for me to believe that right now. Yes, he has a history of adjusting, albeit very late. But I just don't know, especially if that's true that Marcus Morris didn't handle it well. Now, maybe in the playoffs when he really has no choice, he may do it if it's really killing the Clippers, but I think in the regular season, I don't expect it. I expect that on Wednesday night against the Raptors, Marcus Morris will be starting alongside Zubats, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Russ. But coming up, going to be talking about what I think the rotation should be with Norman Powell out of the lineup. Going to be talking about that coming up. But before we talk about that, I got to talk to you about a new app, a new game that I'm about to get into on Wednesday. I'm really geeked, and so is everybody at Locked On, about our new partner and sponsor of today's episode, the mobile game Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. If you've ever thought about being an NBA GM like me, who's joked that I've wanted to be the GM of the Clippers since I was a little kid, well, you can kind of get a taste of what that's like with this game. You can manage every strategic aspect of your team and be a GM, play through the season, lead your team to glory, and you can hire the right coaches and assistants, or the wrong ones, trade and train players, make draft picks, navigate free agency, all of this in a challenging, realistic, but virtual world. I am going to get into it, and I can't wait to compete against my other Locked On hosts, because let me tell you something about me. I'm competitive. I like to win. I hate to lose. So you already know what that means. We need to play this game. Locked On Clippers listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probasketballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up on the app stores. That's probasketballgm.com. Ultimate Basketball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right. I'm going to talk about what I think the rotation should be. Now, Norman Powell is out in this hypothetical, so here's what I'm going to go with. And remember, I asked the pin question, what do you think the starting lineup should be? Rotation, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't want to read all that. But you know what? If you feel like you want to, go ahead. This is my starting lineup. Russell Westbrook, Terrence Mann, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Zoo. Now, the reason why I kept Russ in the starting lineup is just because I don't want to cause another situation with another player being unhappy about being taken out of the starting lineup. And I really do like the offense with Russ starting. I think he does do a good job of letting Kawhi Leonard conserve some energy and play off the ball. And he has had a little more energy in fourth quarters since he's come, I will say, besides the Minnesota game, of course. But Paul George, he likes playing with Russ. So having them together, I like it. But the problem is, as I said in the first segment, we don't have an elite pick and roll defender, or point of attack defender, I should say, to guard the ball. We have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, but they're not going to do it. They're not going to make them do it, the coaching staff. And by the way, in 2021, it's a little different now because he's coming off a torn ACL, but I remember talking about this in 2021 in my post-game lives. Kawhi Leonard, when he was tasked with guarding the best player or a top two player and really had to guard the ball, he would do such a good job and be even more engaged offensively. I don't know what it was about him, but he was just even more locked in. Now, I'm not saying we should do that again, but I think we should consider it. When the playoffs start, definitely we should consider it. But if not, you got to start Terrence Mann. You would say maybe Nico Batum, but the reason why I say Terrence Mann is because he's already started and did well with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard in the starting lineup. And if we're being real, should never have been taken out of the starting lineup in the first place. Now, I don't think that's necessarily for Russ, but at least for Marcus Morris, because Senior's not doing a good job of rebounding. When we downsize a little bit, if you've noticed, Kawhi Leonard's rebounding ability gets showcased even more. And even Paul George, when he really wants it, like that second half against Memphis, or honestly, that whole game against Memphis, he played really well. Both of them were in double-digit rebounds. So I think having a more athletic team that can make up ground and may take more pride guarding the ball defensively with Terrence Mann out there is a good look. So that's my starting lineup. Now, as far as the bench, we don't have Norman Powell. So that means there are 6 players that have a case to get minutes, besides Amir Coffey and Brandon Boston. That's how deep the Clippers are. Bones Highland, Eric Gordon, Mason Plumlee, Nicholas Batum, Robert Covington, and Marcus Morris. Now, if it were up to me, Marcus Morris wouldn't play at all, unless somebody was injured. That's just because I feel as though the other players are better and we have enough shooters and mid-range snipers, and we need guys that guard. Ultimately, guys that don't defend are not going to be able to get big minutes on championship teams. That's how it's always been, and that's how it is even in this era where offense is more of the emphasis. So Bones Highland, as much as I love the guy and I think that he's extremely exciting, gives us a little scoring punch, and also some speed, some downhill rim pressure that we lack, he's not good enough defensively yet. He's going to definitely have to get in the weight room a little bit in the summer, and just because he does get bullied, I've noticed. And also, he just may not be a good defender in terms of moving his feet and just having those instincts, because it is a skill. I do believe defense is a skill, but he can at least control getting a little bit stronger. But offensively, he's electric. I just think that, as I said, guys that don't guard are going to have trouble staying on the court. So let's take Busy and Marcus Morris out of the equation. That leaves us with the other four: Robert Covington, Nico Batum, Eric Gordon, and Mason Plumlee. I would play all of them and then stagger Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. If it were up to me, I would have Paul George play the entire first quarter and then Kawhi Leonard play the entire second quarter, or at least 10 minutes worth. And you know what? If you want to play Busy, I would play him in that span where there's maybe 2 minutes where you have Paul George and Kawhi out at the same time, then play Busy. But I wouldn't do it for that long, because ultimately having Paul George and Kawhi Leonard both out at the same time is just not going to work in the playoffs. And I think with 16 games left, we got to start looking at the playoff kind of rotation. So, because right now what we have is Paul George sitting, Russell Westbrook and Paul George have been coming out around the same time at like the 3-minute mark of the first quarter. Kawhi plays the entire first quarter, and then he starts the second quarter on the bench, and then Paul George will come in to start the second quarter and Russ like shortly after. But they do the same thing in the second half. So then Kawhi Leonard sits to start the fourth quarter, and we get the whole fourth quarter with Paul George. I think it should be the other way around, because I want Kawhi Leonard playing the entire fourth quarter because he's our best player. And then Paul George coming in like midway through it or something. So that would mean that Kawhi Leonard plays the entire second quarter or the last 10 minutes of it if you don't want him to play the entire quarter, and Paul George goes the whole first. I've realized, though, they want to keep Paul George in with Russ. They like that pairing. They want it to play together and whatnot. But there's a way you can make it work. And I'm not going to sit here and going through all those millions of scenarios how. But as far as Eric Gordon, Mason Plumlee, Robert Covington, and Nico Batum, you get all guys. None of them are terrible defenders. We've seen some bad games defensively from Eric Gordon in terms of point of attack and just, honestly, laziness and pride on that end. I mean, Will said it when he came on and talked about it, the Rockets fan, when we got Eric Gordon. He said it's always been about effort with Eric. So when Eric is locked in, fighting over screens, and obviously the one thing he does well is he has good hands, but also can guard up a little bit, guard bigger guys because he's a strong 6'4". So I don't have any, doubt that he can do that. It's more about, he's not the guy to stay with quicker guards, but you see when he's putting a little more effort in, sitting down in a stance, actually trying to fight through screens and not letting them go by him very easily. Mason Plumlee, I've talked about how he's not the rim protector that Zoo is. I don't know if it's timing or just, his anticipation is poor or whatnot, or he's just not stepping up enough. Whatever it is, he's not the rim protector Zoo is, but I'm very pleased with his defense overall as a backup center. So, and then Nico Batum and Robert Covington, you already know the deal with them. They do their defensive duties very well. So I think that should be the rotation until Norman Powell comes back. You have Eric Gordon coming off the bench, and if you have one of Paul George or Kawhi Leonard in, you have offense and creation with those two right there. Nico Batum, Mason Plumlee, and Robert Covington are in creators, but that's why you have those two. And if you really want to get creative, maybe you can throw in Bones Highland there for a little bit, and Robert Covington or Nico or Mason even can get a little bit less minutes. But that would be my rotation, my starting lineup. And coming up, going to look ahead at the games for the week. A 2-day rest for the Clippers before this Wednesday game against the Toronto Raptors. Going to be looking ahead at the week for LAC. But before that, we got to talk about FanDuel. It's the midway point of the NBA season, actually kind of the home stretch, and now's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. On Wednesday, I'm going with the Clippers money line against the Raptors. Why? Just because I feel like, why not? Clippers got to get 2 wins in a row. They got 1 win. Hopefully gets the monkey off their back, and they beat the Raptors. But they've been playing good basketball lately. But FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlays. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right. So before we get off the topic of minutes and rotations, I just want to say Marcus Morris is getting the 5th most minutes on the Clippers this season, 28.5, only behind Ivica Zubac, Russell Westbrook, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George. Now, obviously, it's questionable that Russell Westbrook has already gotten the 3rd highest average just by walking onto the team. For his fans, they would say, no, it's not. He's Russell Westbrook. What do you mean? But obviously, in my opinion, he hasn't been playing better basketball for what the Clippers need than certain other guys if we're talking about throughout the course of the season. Now, it's pretty funny to me that Reggie Jackson also was getting more minutes than Terrence Mann and Nicholas Batum throughout the season. The fact that Marcus Morris averages 5 more minutes than Terrence Mann and 6 more than Nico Batum just shows that Ty Lue has mismanaged this roster. There's no basketball explanation and there's no statistical explanation that defends that anymore, if we're being quite real. And as I said, I do not like blaming coaches. If I was the host of Locked On Clippers for the last 2 seasons, I would have never blamed Ty Lue for much at all, if anything. And you can see that on Dime Dropper, I never did. But this season has just not been like the others with him. I think he's picked favorites, and he has made he's put guys in positions to fail, and he hasn't put everybody in their best positions, in the most positions to succeed. But speaking of succeeding, the Clippers need to start developing a streak here. A big ESPN clash on Wednesday night against the Toronto Raptors. Kawhi Leonard and Norman Powell's former teams. Now, obviously, Norman Powell will not be playing, but the Toronto Raptors are actually playing pretty good basketball. They put Jakob Poeltl in the starting lineup. They've lacked a center for a long time, and they won 3 games in a row. Then they won 4 games in a row, so 7 out of the last 8 games. And they've won 9 out of the last 12 or 9 of the last 13. So they're in their best form of the season. So this is not going to be an easy game by any stretch. They lost the Nuggets in Denver by 5 points. That's not much. They beat the Wizards on the road. They're currently on a road trip. This is going to be the 4th game of their road trip, but they also lost to the Wizards by 11 2 games ago. So, at the end of the day, if the Clippers play to their best of their abilities and come out, defend, take pride in that, play hard for 4 quarters, and move the ball, attack the basket, be aggressive, they can beat anybody on a given night. But that's a big if, all those things I said. The Raptors are a team with a lot of size and a lot of length and wings. Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George are going to have a tough battle in that one. And last season, it was funny. I don't think the Clippers had either of them, and it was a really good game. One of my favorites of the season last year. Scotty Barnes played, Pascal Siakam played, Fred Van Vliet played, Gary Trent Jr. played. It was a good game. Clippers almost won. But Paul George and Kawhi Leonard will be playing against them, and Kawhi Leonard did beat the Raptors in their first visit to Staples Center to play the Clippers after the trade. After he signed with the Clips. Remember, that was a game where Kawhi Leonard kind of took over the 4th quarter and we won. I don't remember the 2021 version of that game because that season with no fans was just hard to remember the individual games sometimes for me personally, but it's a big game. I mean, as I've said for the Clippers, every game is a must-win at this point. The Western Conference standings are changing every day, so it's kind of meaningless for me to report about it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right now, the Clippers are in 8th place. A win, and by the way, the Minnesota Timberwolves lost to the Philadelphia 76ers on Tuesday night, so a win puts the Clippers in 7th place. The Warriors also lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder, so that would only put the Clippers half a game behind the Warriors if they won. So it's a huge game for the Clippers. If they can beat Toronto in the 7th spot, at least at the worst, if they get a play-in spot, they will have one chance at home, and I'll obviously be at the game cheering my lungs out to secure a playoff spot. And oh my God, the nerves for me in that game would be crazy. But also an update in the standings, the Sacramento Kings have now taken the Memphis Grizzlies spot at 2nd. So for all the Clipper fans that said that they want Sacramento, Well, getting a play-in spot may be the way to do that. And Sacramento is probably going to keep winning. Memphis, without John Moran and Brandon Clark, and I don't know how long Steven Adams is going to be out, or continue to be out, I should say, they can plummet in the standings. Now, I don't know if the Phoenix Suns will catch them. They could. You never know. But it's going to be a little bit tough. That 6th seed, if it's Memphis at the 3, could be extremely desirable. And then Sacramento in round 2. If it ends up like that, that would be a golden opportunity for the Clippers if they can do that as a lower seed. But right now, the Clippers, they can't think about, who they're going to play and what seed and what route. The Clippers need to find the best versions of themselves, and by doing that, you need to win games and win, consecutive games and build good habits, build streaks, build rhythm. Toronto, huge game, absolutely huge. I'm such a one game at a time guy that I don't even like looking at the next game after that. So I'm not going to really do it, but it's the Knicks on Saturday. So 2 big games. The Knicks just lost to the Charlotte Hornets, and they were on a winning streak. So we'll see. Maybe they'll go on a little bit of a losing streak. Clippers can make it 2 in a row against the Raptors on Wednesday. It's a big game. Thanks for making Locked On Clippers your first listen today. Now make your second listen game-to-game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game-to-Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game-to-Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. The age-old proverb continues, but actually not yet. Make sure to comment what your starting lineup is if you were the coach of the Clippers. Locked On Clippers, make sure to subscribe at the notification bell. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod, and of course, subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for more Clipper and NBA content. The age-old proverb continues, go Clippers. I'm probably going to be in the building on Wednesday night, rooting on the boys, as usual. Let's get it.